Good evening. Today is Tuesday, September 14, 2021, and this is the 68th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. My guest today is a good friend of mine, Chuck Holton. Chuck is a U.S. Army veteran of Operation Just Cause in Panama and also a former member of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Chuck has been on the front lines protecting America and Americans ever since leaving the service by really bringing his ground view of the truth, as well as contributing to the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN, as well as the cameraman for Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North and his weblog, Boots on the Ground, and also his own blog, The Hot Zone with Chuck Holton, which I was privileged to be a guest on. Chuck has been very intimately approaching the immigration issues and topics, and also the misinformation campaign that is surrounding it, which has led to some of the human tragedies that are now coming through the southern borders, but also have affected what we call the death march, which extends deep into the central and also South American jungles. This new death march is pulling people in by the millions into a pipeline, these initial victims that are now globally being thrown into a horrific process by eventually leads to U.S. Small town in America. What Chuck has witnessed in places like the Darien Gap and also on the Panama and Colombian border would be considered a crime against humanity if it had occurred just a few decades ago. Before I bring Chuck in, I want to show one of the works that he has provided for the Christian Broadcasting Network that really highlights what we're going to be speaking about today.
The unfolding human tragedy along the U.S. southern border is also getting attention from transnational drug cartels. CBN News contributing correspondent Chuck Holton reports they're taking advantage of the chaos.
Every day, boats arrive here in the tiny Colombian border town of Capurganá. But these aren't tourists. They're migrants from all across the globe.
Most of them are from Africa, Pakistan, India, and Haiti, and some Cubans. It's a humanitarian crisis.
What should be an out-of-the-way fishing village has become the last off-ramp on a human trafficking highway that plunges right through the forbidding Darien Gap. These migrants aren't customers, they're products. And their desire to make it to the U.S. means big profits for the smugglers who send them into the jungle.
You know, I don't like to talk too loudly around here, but basically that's what they do. They pay the young kids here to be the mules. They take them over the mountains or through the, to the San Blas.
But there's another commodity here that's even more profitable: cocaine. This country has always been the #1 exporter of this illicit drug. But the amount being grown in Colombia today is near an all-time high.
With President Uribe, we got as small as 40,000 hectares. With President Santos, who sold to the world that he was the peace maker, we get into 300,000 hectares.
Eradication efforts haven't been as effective in recent years due to concerns about the health risks of spraying coca fields from the air. So Colombia has had to resort to methods which are less effective and much more dangerous.
We have 16 soldiers, policemen, and eradicators killed by mines because the guerrilla put mines everywhere around.
So I wanted to try and track this group of migrants we watched go into the Darien Gap on the Colombian side when they came out the other end. So I took a quick flight to Panama, and now I'm driving down to the Darien Gap on this side to try to meet them. And I think I figured out how these drug runners are taking advantage of the flow of migrants to move their product north. What they do is get local Colombian guys to put on backpacks full of cocaine, and then they salt them in with the migrants. That's because the migrants are getting preferential treatment from immigration officials at the border. See, the border's actually closed, but Colombian immigration officials told me they're being instructed to look the other way when the migrants come through. And so in that way, these guys can get their drugs north without being stopped at the border.
I made it to the camp where the migrants were being kept, but wasn't allowed to enter because of COVID restrictions. I did manage to get through on the phone to a 16-year-old Haitian migrant named Madesi.
Many people died. One woman drowned and 2 other men lost their wives. Many people died.
In all, 12 of the 70 or so migrants we witnessed at the start of their journey did not survive, including this 10-month-old baby who succumbed to dysentery. In addition, Madesi told me the entire group was robbed at gunpoint and at least a dozen women were raped by cartel members. But the migrants keep coming. Locals say the number is up 4-fold in the last 2 months. The flow of cocaine is keeping pace as well. Panama seized more than 1.5 tons a week for the past year. But while the cartels have to evade authorities to move their drugs, the flow of people is much easier, because the migrants get support from local governments as they transit Central America. Victor Avila is a former ICE agent.
The cartels have taken over. We used to have the human traffickers and the human smugglers and the drug traffickers. That no longer exists. It's now all the cartels. You will encounter the cartels. You will have to pay the piso, the plaza, the quota to them, whether you're going to turn yourself in or not. These people are paying $3,500, $4,000 a head to even turn themselves in to seek asylum.
So whether it's Haitians or heroin, Cubans or cocaine, the narcos are getting rich either way. From Panama, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Chuck, it's good to have you here, brother. It's good to know that we still got crazy rangers like you and Michael Young and stuff guys are willing to go out there and tread through that Darien Gap. You know, Chuck and I are born at the same year in '69, but I guarantee you Chuck probably could still outrun me. Thank God I'm a better shooter. Chuck, it's good to have you here. I know, we kind of smile about it, but it really is, as I said in the opening remarks, it could have been a war crime years ago. Why is it that we're not stopping this? I mean, is there that much money that's being made that even the governments do not want to stop this?
Well, they certainly don't have the institutional will to stop it. They could stop it. And in fact, they did stop it during the Trump administration. When COVID first hit, Panama closed their borders, and they did it. It's impossible to actually close the border between Panama and Colombia because it's just untracked jungle and people just go around. But what they did was they said, if you come into Panama, you're not leaving until the COVID crisis is over. And so a lot of those people ended up in camps in the Panamanian jungle for over a year. That effectively stopped the flow of migrants because nobody wanted to come knowing that they'd be stuck in a camp like the one you're seeing on the screen there for a year. So the problem we're seeing now is that everybody is being told by their friends and relatives in the United States and by the president of the United States that now is the time to come, that the border is wide open. Is a real problem because this has made this deadliest, by far, the deadliest year on record. And that's just the number of bodies that the Border Patrol has found on the U.S. southern border. That's not including hundreds of people who are dying every week in the Darien Gap and along the way between the Darien and when they get to the United States. So it's a very dangerous journey. And these people are dying in droves. And yet, because of the political aspect of it, the Democrats basically are allowing this to happen. It's obvious that they don't care about the people. What they want is the bodies in these sanctuary cities so that they can affect things like the apportionment issue from the most recent census.
No, look, we saw this coming years ago. Both Obama wanted and Trump wanted to leave the Middle East. But Obama wanted to leave the Middle East and pivot towards South America because he was looking at the future possible generations of voters that could be coming in here. And they wanted to make sure that the stage was set for a possibility of a new brand of immigrants coming in and usually voting Democrat. Trump pivoted away from the Middle East too, but he looked at, he wanted to leave the Middle East, I should say, but he pivoted towards supporting India to buffer against China. So now you got, some people say the third administration, third term of the Obamas who are now again wanting to leave the Middle East, as we know they did. Look at what happened with Afghanistan. Unfortunately, folks, a lot of the opium that you're going to see the Taliban sell, they make billions of dollars from it, is going to make it into the Darien Gap and make it up into the United States. And also you're going to see individuals that are going to leave Afghanistan are going to make it all the way into South America and come into our borders. What is it that we can do to affect maybe a stop for that? I mean, if you're not going to be able to change anything until maybe 2022, maybe possibly 2024 election, is there anything else that could be done to kind of stop what is happening currently in South America, and how is it really affecting those countries?
Well, it is a tremendous burden on small countries like Panama. They're spending like $6 million a week on food for the migrants that are coming through. And they're seeing something like 1,000 migrants a day now coming into the Darien Gap. And this is a real problem for Panama. So it becomes this political game of hot potato that Panamanians don't want them in their country. And so they ship them on to Costa Rica. Costa Rica doesn't want them, so they ship them on to Nicaragua, and so on and so forth, all the way up to the United States. All it would take to stop this process, or at least the extracontinental migrants coming in, maybe not the ones from, the Northern Triangle countries, but at least the extracontinentals, would be to do what Donald Trump did, and that is reinstitute the Remain in Mexico policy. When they knew that they couldn't get directly into the United States, the flow of migrants reduced to a trickle. It was down to almost nothing. And all these people, because they didn't want to live in Mexico. And now keep in mind, every one of the migrants you see on that screen is the Democrats will tell you they're fleeing war and oppression. That is not true. They may have been fleeing war and oppression when they left Haiti and went to Suriname, but they've passed through 10 different countries across Latin America since then. None of those countries were prosecuting or persecuting these people from Cuba, from Haiti, from Bangladesh, from Indonesia, from Somalia, from all these places. They pass through up to a dozen countries before they get to the United States. Any one of those countries would be better than the place that they left. So although I don't blame anybody for leaving Haiti, I do blame them for coming illegally into the United States, because you are an economic migrant at that point. You're not fleeing war and oppression. If you've been living in Ecuador for 3, 4, 5 years, making a living, if you're well-fed, you've got an iPhone, but you're choosing to come to the United States now and drag your children through the Darien Gap, where they're very likely to die, and doing it all because you can make more money in the United States. That is called an economic migrant, and that is not a case for asylum. None of these people
qualify. None of these people.
Don't. And so they're. Go ahead.
No, I lost you there for a second. You broke up, but you're right. None of these people qualify for it. There was a gentleman that on a previous video that we're not going to show tonight, but he came from India. I mean, he literally traveled to Europe, found his way to South America, and you get individuals coming in here that, you're right, do not qualify for it. But it is a reality of when you open up these pipelines and people see an easy way in, they use it. And I know that on this end, we also give them a lot of stipends to be able to take care of them. These were 3 of the gentlemen out of Cuba that Michael Yon had interviewed. I do know that you had briefed a number of delegates who had gone there to see what is happening. What happened with those delegates? Were they able to come back and do anything legislatively to have an effect, or is it which party is in charge?
Well, yeah, I mean, they were absolutely shocked when they came down and saw the scope of the problem, and it's far worse now than it was when they were there. I've been back to that village since the congressmen were there, and it's much, much worse. Now, they were able to go back and speak very forcefully to the issue. And that's important. I think that it's important for them to understand what they're talking about. It makes me cringe how often I listen to people stand up in situations like that in front of Congress or testifying before Congress, and they just don't get it right. They don't understand the intricacies of this issue. Now, let me just say, I just came from an 11 country tour of Europe and North Africa, reporting on the same migrant issue that we're seeing here in the United States, that they're seeing this continuing issue into Europe, and they have the same problems. They have people from all over the world. They're trying to make it into Europe because Europe has this pull factor of a strong welfare state, especially in places like Germany. So what we're seeing is that the border countries in the Schengen zone in Europe are Greece and Lithuania and places like that, and they are getting just overrun with migrants. And the migrants are being used in many cases as weapons. Turkey and Belarus are using these migrants to create a burden. I mean, imagine this: if Belarus were to bomb Lithuania and cause $1 billion in damage, that would be an act of war, and all of Europe would come to the defense of Lithuania, and Belarus would get crushed. However, by sending tens of thousands of migrants illegally across their borders on purpose and assisting them to get across, and even recruiting them to come into Belarus and go illegally into Lithuania, they can cost Lithuania more than $1 billion a year, and it's not a technical act of war. And so they get away with it. So these migrants are being used as political pawns and weapons. We're seeing the same thing between Morocco and Spain. We're seeing the same thing between Turkey and Greece. All of these countries are using these migrants as weapons. And in fact, in a way, you could say that that's what Mexico does to the United States as well.
Well, look, I mean, the fight that's taking place has historical reference to it too. You know, a long time ago, when you started having the northern and southern nations, you saw that the northern nations had a higher GDP, the southern nations being very poor in this case, and the middle nations, where Mexico sat, where all this fight took place between the northern and southern nations, where it also led to some of the problems that we have today with drugs coming in because of all the really using a different type of proxy to have those fights for you. Now, all these areas globally have become the backyard for nations, you know, so China even sees some of these nations as backyard. Look, there's open source. If you take a look at some of the videos out there, you got some of the coyotes that are bringing people in, they're speaking Persian. These are Iranians that are bringing people into the United States. You know, Iran has a large, one of the largest embassies in Mexico, if not the largest. And, you know, they're sitting in Venezuela, even with their drone capability. Now, they're not going to use any type of a drone capability to conduct EMP attacks against us, but they are on the ground and they have that capability. They could do those things if they want to. And the first people who really started this, it was on my first year anniversary when I had set up my company on September 11th of 2014. We looked at Egypt. I'm sorry, not Egypt, but Turkey. Turkey started using this to hold Europe hostage and demanded money from them. It was part of the fight because at that time Europe was really squeezing him as to never allowing him possibly to be part of the European Union, and Turkey was just shipping those individuals in. And then we come to find out between 2014 and 2017 that Turkey was the one that was allowing ISIS to operate throughout Turkey, coming in, taking oil, bringing out to the Sinjar line into the Kurdish regional government area, who was giving it to them for the cheap, and they were selling it to the Europeans. So there's an economic issue here at hand. And unfortunately, as we talked about just a couple of shows ago, or a couple of weeks ago, I was on your show, and we talked about what's going to happen with possibly the same crisis being created with the Afghan refugees that are probably going to be transitioning. Turkey just stopped a number of buses the Turkish gendarmes that got on them, and it was all filled with Afghan refugees. And nobody had a clue where the hell they appeared from. And the driver wasn't even Turkish. So somebody is funneling this, and unfortunately, I think it's going to come to the U.S. Is there anything that you think lessons learned that Europe might be doing a little bit different, that might be in some countries a positive that we may be able to look at?
Yeah, Lithuania is doing a really good job. They know how costly this is for them, but they also know that all of these migrants don't want to stay in Lithuania. They want to go through Lithuania to get to Germany because Germany offers more benefits. You know, if one of these migrants gets into Germany, they give him like $1,600 a month and free housing for the duration. That's like winning the lottery for somebody from Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq or you name it. So yes, Lithuania knows that for every one they allow to continue going on to Germany, that 3 more will take their place. And so they're biting the bullet, and they're telling these migrants, if you come into Lithuania, you're not going to be persecuted here, but you cannot leave. You have to stay in Lithuania. And the migrants are getting very angry, and they're rioting over this because they don't want to stay in Lithuania, but it is proving to be a very powerful deterrent to illegal migration into Lithuania. So now they're starting to go in through Poland instead, but the bottom line is that's exactly what the Remain in Mexico policy was. That's how Panama stopped illegal migration into their country during the COVID crisis by just simply saying, if you come in here, you have to stay. You can't continue on. And I think that it would be so much cheaper for the United States to pay Panama to just keep these migrants, to just tell them, look, we will come down there and build massive refugee camps and we will pay for them. Because according to the Federation for American Immigration Reform, every one of these immigrant families who comes into the United States and gets on welfare and starts getting on these different programs that are available to them, they know how to game the system. They know how to sign up for multiple programs in multiple states. And it costs the American taxpayer something like $60,000 a year for every one of these migrants. So it would be cheaper, actually, if we just built refugee camps in Panama and let them stay in Panama and just paid Panama to keep them. And that would stop the flow. The other thing that Panama ought to do is they ought to put it out that if you come through the Darien Gap with a baby, with anybody under 18, we will arrest you and put you in prison, and we will take that baby away, because it is child abuse to drag a baby through the Darien Gap. 6 days through the jungle with no clean water or food is a good way to get your baby killed. But it's happening by the dozens every single day right now, and they're doing it because of the policy in the United States, because Joe Biden's policy says if you show up on the southern border with a child, with a baby, you skip the whole process and get let right in. We give you a plane ticket. The Office of Immigrant Assistance gives you a check from the American taxpayer for $4,500 per person, and they send you anywhere you want to go the United States. That's what has to stop. We've got to stop the pull factor.
Well, I mean, it's been created that way, and look, a lot of the women that are being brought in here and they're coming here, they're being trafficked, and they're going to be used as sex slaves anyway in the United States. But you're going to have a lot of those young women that are going to come here. They're going to be the future citizens of the United States, maybe. And you're talking about possibly almost what the figures are starting to show. In some cases, you might have 8 out of 10 that have been raped. And these are going to be your future citizens in the United States. Imagine what kind of future generations we're going to have when every mother out there, every woman out there, daughter knows that she was a rape victim as she came to the United States. So the needs and wants
I've talked to a lot of these women who have been raped in the Darien Gap, and they're very pragmatic about it, and they say, you know what, it's just the price of admission, and I'm willing to do that.
Amazing.
I talked to some Cuban women who had just stepped out of the jungle. Their feet were bloody. They were limping toward the clinic in Bajo Chiquito, the first village that they get to in Panama. And I said, I was looking at their feet, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And of course, they had been raped, they had been robbed. And I said, I said, where are you from? And they said, Cuba, but we're free. But now we're free. And I said, well, was it worth all this? And the lady kind of stopped, and she kind of choked up a little bit, and she looked me right in my eye, and she said, and much more. It's worth this and much more to get freedom. And I think that gives me a little bit of hope, because the Democrats want to bring all these migrants in because they think they're going to vote Democrat, and they're concerned about the apportionment issue, meaning if you get enough of these migrants into these sanctuary cities, they actually have a vote, even if they're not citizens, because they apportion the congressman at the end of the census based on the number of bodies, not the number of citizens, right? So that was one issue. But these people are coming from communist-run countries. They know how bad socialism is, and they're coming from countries where Latin America, prayer is still required in schools. Divorce is more difficult. Abortion is illegal. They can't imagine the social justice and all that kind of crap that we see in the United States. And they are, by and large, much more conservative than the Democrats who are bringing them in. So at some point, the tail may start to wag the dog here once those people are able to vote, but that remains to be seen. The bottom line is, if you're going to come in, you shouldn't have to break the law to do it. We should have a way that allows people to come in and work and get jobs, not have to work under the table, but we should not allow them to take money from the American taxpayer just by virtue of the fact that they got across our border. That is the pull factor that has to stop.
Yeah, eventually the country is going to be in a lot of trouble. I mean, economically, we're not in a good place anyway. I mean, the final day that U.S. military left Bagram Air Base on the 30th of August. Of course, we left all those Americans back there that, you have friends and I have friends and Mike has friends that are now working up there trying to get guys out of there. And we're trying our best ourselves to try to get folks out. On that day, the Russians, which are a part of OPEC Plus nation, and also Saudi Arabia, which is an OPEC nation, one of the founding nations, came together and signed an actual agreement to get rid of the petrodollar. That means U.S. dollar over the next couple of years is no longer going to be tied to petrol. If you're not tied to any type of commodity that can actually value you just paper, and they're looking for the next 2 years in a basket of different type of currency, to include some cryptocurrencies out there, to be able to replace it with maybe a group of Russian currency, Euro currency, Euro itself, and also what the Chinese are bringing to the table. 1% increase in our interest rate is a $225 billion hit on just the interest itself. And now you got the current president, the POTUS, trying to pass a bill that is looking at going even north of what its own Fed has said is going to completely destroy our economy. So those people are running over here. They're getting raped. And in 2 more years, if that dollar that you got in your hand is worthless, you talk about an implosion inside of the United States, and it's going to get worse than what we have seen in the cities that we see even today. Is going to be just absolutely amazing. And I know crime is also a very key, large piece of it, especially for those southern states. Chuck, I know that you had also looked at Africa in the past. I know I'm going to be looking at Kenya because of what's happening. We have the issues of South Sudan, only Christian nation that was carved out of an Islamic nation there. But you have also now ISIS moving in. Unfortunately, the president of South Sudan is a corrupt person who was appointed into the position, just like the Taliban were appointed into the position. And he's even looking at right now bringing the old party that was disbanded in Sudan itself, which initially harbored Osama bin Laden, before U.S. put pressure on Sudan for him to be sent to Afghanistan. He's starting to bring those individuals in, putting some of them in his power structure to protect himself. Tell me a little bit about what you think is happening with the southern border when it comes to this radical ideologies of these individuals who are really coming in to be possible cells to be used in the future in the U.S. It may not be until a decade from now. What are some of the stuff that you guys have seen coming through?
You know, I aside from what's coming across the southern border, I don't think they have to come across the southern border, although we have met people from Muslim terror-supporting countries coming up through the Darien Gap and through Mexico into the United States. I've met many of them personally, people from Somalia. In the southernmost city in Mexico, Tapachula, there are, it's such a crossroads. There are actually restaurants that the menu is in Somali. There are restaurants where the menu is in Bangladeshi because there are so many of those people in that town on their way to the United States. But we just imported something like 117,000 people from Afghanistan into the United States directly. And the Taliban would be ridiculously dumb if they didn't include some of their own guys in that because there was very little vetting going on. There was very little, it was so chaotic that anybody could get on that plane. And so now those people are in the United States. I mean, can you imagine the idea of being able to invade a country and make that very country pay for the invasion? That's exactly what we're seeing right now. And there was a book written about this in the 1970s called The Camp of the Saints. And I recommend you go and read it. It'll read like the newspaper today. And I think when the history books are written about this epic, this era of American history, August 31st, 2021 will be the day that America stopped being a global superpower on the stage, because the absolute travesty that we've witnessed in Afghanistan, America is now a laughing stock to not just our enemies, but to our friends in the global community. And they know they can't trust us. They know they can't. They used to say, I used to hear this a lot from like the Kurds. They would say, well, the Americans will always do the right thing once they've expended all other options. But they don't even say that anymore. Now they say our only friends are the mountains, because they know they can't count on the United States. Everybody knows they can't count on the United States. And then you couple that with the fact that 78% of young people in America today are too obese to even qualify for the U.S. military. The fact that they've had to extend basic training by several weeks just to get people in good enough shape to start basic training, people who do qualify. The fact that 6 out of 10 can't even pass the ASVAB test with a 30%. That's all you need to pass. And 6 out of 10 can't pass that. So and then you take the fact that the United States military is apparently doing everything they can to recruit transvestites and lesbians into the military. And then you look at what China's doing with outlawing video games, with outlawing the depictions of effeminate men on television, and we're training every day to lose.
Yeah, you're going to fight the wars to win. I mean, it's amazing. We don't fire anybody either, in World War II, as you know, has been said by many others, not Colonel Sangari, of course. We used to fire generals, but in those days, we used to fire a general and then, put them in a different unit. They would still come back and work. The firing of an officer was that, listen, you're not synced with the current command. We're not working together, and we're in combat operations. So we cannot have that happen. We're going to end up losing people. So they would move people all the time, but people would get rehired. They would be in a different team. It was almost like soccer coaches moving from a team to team, or a coach in baseball. But today, they don't even fire anybody anymore. It's amazing. Yeah. And now they're starting to squeeze the special operational units to try to make them come along and be like like what we had seen. When I worked on the 7th Warfighting Function, and we beta tested it with the Syrian Army between 2014 and 2017, it looked at what our future force structure should look like and how to operate. all the way into 2022. So, we're still a year away from what I had worked on after I left in 2014. But I got to tell you, what I saw worked on then, it is not what I'm seeing on the ground. I saw it with this immigrant community fighting in the Middle East because I beta tested it there, doing tier 1, tier 2, level operations. But I don't see it even in our force structures here. We got civilians, guys like you and me, older in the tooth, as they say, on the ground trying to get Americans out. It's become a old military guys game these days to try to get our folks out of even Afghanistan. Chuck, I know you talked about books that have been written on these issues, but I know you've written some books. I do want to make sure as we're coming out to the close of the program, we will have you back on again. But what is your next assignment? What are you looking at? And if people want to learn more about your work, can they go?
On Friday, I leave for Armenia for 2 weeks. I'll be they're having their 1-year anniversary of the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan and Turkey. And so we're going to go and stand with the Armenian people on that. That people don't understand what a big deal that war was. They lost 5,000 of their young men in the space of about 60 days. And that was all due to the fact that Turkey was sending their drones over to bomb the Armenian military. And it was a very sad time for them. So we're going over to stand with the Armenian people and do some reporting on that. From there, I may go to Tajikistan or Hungary, depending on how things go. So I never really know until I'm about 2 days from leaving where I'm going to end up, but that's just the way my job is.
Well, Tajikistan is having problems, that. So I don't know if it's going to resolve itself. You might be walking in when everything is hot, especially in the country. We did it by destabilizing the region. I know we have a QR code here for those who want to know. And it seems for whatever reason, our live stream is starting to get interrupted. Don't talk the truth, otherwise you get squeezed when it comes to social media. But for our viewers, I know that if you look at the ambassador speakers, Chuck is also available to talk, and I would highly encourage you to invite him. He's written 7 books now that I know of, and I think they're outstanding. And I'm not saying just because he's a good friend. He's a good writer, and he does an outstanding job on the ground. I wanted to say, before I give the floor to Chuck for closing remarks, today is the 3-year anniversary of my dad's passing. He came here as an immigrant. He really pretty much left everything behind, but he came officially as an immigrant here. He never asked for a handout. He worked hard. He was a physics professor and went and worked on the south side of Chicago. He worked as a custodian, cleaning bathrooms and toilets. My mom figured out what he was doing and told him, I don't want you to do that. He didn't continue with his education because he wanted to put us all to school. His son served 20 years in the U.S. military, Army Infantry, Special Operation Forces, created the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement, and I established the United Assyrian Appeal to help with multi-families. And for those who can, please help us out again, because we're looking at ISIS manifesting in northern Iraq and Syria, and we will need your donations to get ready for the possible threat coming next spring again. So United Assyrian Appeal. And the other piece, his other daughter, served first in the Chicago Fire Department as a paramedic. And, my other sister graduated cum laude from Loyola University. And my brother also a graduate of Columbia. So we've done our best. He left good roots. And I hope, however you come here as an immigrant, first, I would like you to come as a legal immigrant. But if you do come because you thought there was no other options of coming in here, you need to work your best to make sure that this country stays. Because if you don't, it will go down faster than you imagine. We've seen how much has changed over the past just 20 years while I've been in the service. Chuck, I'm going to give you the last word, buddy, and then you could go ahead and write us off into the sunset.
Well, I sure appreciate you having me on, and it's been a real eye-opening experience this year following the migrant trail as they come from all over the world and filter themselves up through the United States. And I think it's important to say that many of these people don't understand what it is that they're coming here for. They think they're coming here to make more money. They think they're coming here to have a better life. But what they're going to find is a very divided culture, a very angry culture, a very violent culture, and they're going to find that things are unbelievably expensive. So yeah, you might make more money, but I've talked to some of these migrants who say, boy, it's not all that I thought it was going to be, for sure, and it has been very difficult for them while they're here. I think that it's important to get that word out because there are lots of places these people could go and have a better life and escape persecution without coming to the United States. It's a very narrow mindset to say that the U.S. is the only place on the planet where people can come and be safe. That's just not true. And so if we could get that word out, maybe these people would build a good life in Brazil or in Ecuador or in Chile or someplace like that. I mean, if they want to come to the United States, great. But again, they should not be able to essentially steal from the American people by coming in. We should not allow them to steal from American taxpayers by coming in and immediately signing up for a bunch of programs that are going to pay them a bunch of money that I certainly don't get paid, that come out of my pocketbook. And so that's just fair. And a country cannot survive. Our country cannot support this long term. And the question I think we have to ask ourselves is, where does it end? How many people have to come into the United States before this thing stops? And the answer is all of them. It won't end until they're all here. And long before then, the United States as a country will collapse. And so if we want to see it stick around, we have to make some hard decisions. And that starts for you and me at the ballot box. We've got to start voting in people who understand this stuff and are willing to make the hard choices and not the politically expedient choices.
Well, we'll see how it goes. Thank you very much, Chuck. We'll find out. California has a vote coming up in a couple of hours. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's going to go the way that it should go for us to be able to reset everything over the next couple of years. Chuck, it was a pleasure having you here. I'm sorry we've been having these internet issues, but when you start pointing out some things that they don't like, even the live streams get squeezed. I can understand on one end, but when both of us are having problems, that's not good. Much appreciated, Chuck. God bless. Stay safe, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, there's new paradigms, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, Colonel.